Okay, guys. So, first episode of the last season, season 8 of Game of Thrones, just aired. I don't want to give away too many spoilers as well. Although that this episode didn't really have so many spoilers. A lot of it was just a lot of things some reunions that we knew was going to happen. The Starks at Winterfell, etc., etc. But not a lot of surprises this episode. So I don't want to talk too much about the episode per se. I do want to talk about Game of Thrones. This is the final season, and it's sort of like as the season starts, I want to kind of talk about what the show has meant to me, and I'm sure it's meant to a lot of people around the world. As we go through the final season, it's going to be pretty tough. I don't think any show has ever. I think the closest that any show has ever come to affecting me like this is Sopranos. I think Sopranos was the first show that I really fell in love with, and I was really like. The characters really grew with you, and especially at that time in your life, in terms of like the going from the late 90s into the 2000s. That was really for me. That was a transition. That was my college years. I was really sort of maturing into quote unquote a man, whatever you want to call that. But so I grew up with the show. So The Sopranos was something that is like I really cared about the characters, and it was also a show. I think the first show that really sort of like took you out your comfort zone, because you really didn't know what's going to happen. Like anybody could have died, right? So Sopranos is what started it for me, in terms of like that type of show that just keeps you on the edge of your seat and you're really invested in the story and the characters. But then Game of Thrones came along, and there's no words to describe like what this show is, what it means to a lot of people. I can only talk about what it means to me. I'm a kid that I was always in love with fantasy and science fiction. I remember something very personal for me is that my first introduction to The Hobbit was, I was about 10 years old, and it was my English class in primary school in the Caribbean, and my teacher, Mrs. Glass, she started reading this excerpt. It was an exercise where we had to read like a paragraph from our favorite book or something, and then everybody went and read some book. We're all 10 years old, and the teacher, our head teacher for the class, she started to read from The Hobbit, and it was just like about goblins and about magic, and I was just like, as a kid, I was just blown away by it. I didn't even know this book existed. So then I read the whole book, The Hobbit, and I fell in love with The Hobbit and Tolkien's whole fantasy world, and the whole universe of the Lord of the Rings. And then of course, the funny part is that I didn't even know, reading at the 10 years old, 11 years old, The Hobbit, I didn't even know that there was 3 more. I didn't even know the Lord of the Rings existed until I was like 13, 14 years old. Right, so it's like when I discovered the Lord of the Rings, I was like, oh my God, there's more, right? And so I come from I'm a Trekkie. I grew up in Star Wars. I really love science fiction and fantasy. And then, then Game of Thrones came along in 2010, and it blew everybody away, because no one has ever done a show like that. I mean, you're talking about Shakespeare quality acting. The finest actors on stage actors in Great Britain and around the world, and the writing and the wardrobe, the cinematography, it's perfect show. It's a perfect show. And it's a show that I watch. It's the only show that I watch where I'm like on the edge of my seat and I'm shaking. I'm like, no, I don't know, like I have this anxious, this anxiety, and I can't explain. Like I'm a pretty cool individual. I mean, I don't ever let anybody see me sweat. I can go through and I can do a lot of things without showing any panic, any fear. But it's like when I sit down on my couch and I watch Game of Thrones, it's like I'm a little boy lost in the woods, and it's dark, and there's strange sounds, and there's things, and I don't know what's gonna get me, right? I don't know what's coming after me. I don't know what's gonna get me, and it's just that type of primal. It's not about fear, but it's like this primal emotion that you're just on. You're like a puppet. You're just on the strings of the show, and so in anticipation of the final season, I just want to say how much it's meant to me over the last 9 years, right? It started in 2010, and from the first show, you have no idea, and I'm sure everybody, all you guys out there probably have similar stories of like, you have people that you meet and like they've never seen Game of Thrones, right? And then you're the one to introduce them. You said, listen, man, I think you should check out the show. Like, just take my advice. And usually it's people that people that sort of respect my opinion, because they know that, like, hey Mike, if Mike really likes something, I'm not easily impressed. So it's like, if I like something and I really like and I love something, it's like for me to come up to you and say, hey, look at this, you got to see this, look at this, look at this, look at this thing, you got to see it. If I'm impressed, then my friends that know me got to be like, oh yeah, well, if Mike's freaking out about this, some's got to be pretty special, right? So I mean, I've got friends that I've given, like, hey, check out the show, man. Don't, because the funny part is that you got people out there that, like, they're so condescending, they're so, like, patronizing, they're so, like, oh yeah, I've never seen Game of Thrones, I don't know what the big deal is. Like, go fuck yourself. You're not smarter than everybody. You're not the cool kid. In fact, you're the stupid kid. You're not gonna be allowed at the table with the cool kids because you didn't look at Game of Thrones, because you think you're too cool. No, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones and you haven't, how can I put, you haven't taken the time to even just look at one episode, and you cannot start in the middle. You have to start at the beginning. That's how powerful it is. You got to start at episode 1, scene 1, season 1. You know what I mean? And you got to go through the journey, just like the rest of us, motherfuckers. We've been through there. We went through the Red Wedding. We went through Joffrey. We went through all the bad, evil characters. You know what I mean? Ramsay, you name it. We've been there. We've been through the heartache, right? So you guys that haven't seen the show, right? Don't be jerks. Go start from season 1, the beginning of the show, and then talk to us afterwards, right? Because what we have as Game of Thrones fans is like something that's gonna live forever, man. This show is gonna end. I don't care if they make other, like, spin-offs. It's okay. I'm really excited to see those as well. The books are always there, and I'm reading the books now. But like, this is something that's gonna, like, people have no idea how, like, magical this thing is. Not just the literal meaning of the show, but it's like, 20, 30, 40 years from now, when we're all, like, old in our old folks home, in a retirement home somewhere, in our 80s and 90s, and like, we're really wheeling around in a wheelchair or on our deathbed, it's like, we're gonna have one thing in common. No matter where we came from, whatever, we're gonna be like, dude, Game of Thrones, man. Remember when Ramsay took it? When he got that L? Remember when Joffrey? Right? Right? It's like, it's a fraternity of like pain, it's like you're a Navy SEAL or you're some member of some elite special operations team. It's like, you've been through war together. You've been through trauma. You've held the line, man. You've held the door. Hold the door. You've done it. You've been there. We've done it. We've been there together. This is the final. It's like the final season, man. And it's like, I'm so happy that it's back. It doesn't feel like 2 years. That's how great the show is. Like, it's been gone for 2 years and it's back this morning, and it's like, it's just like an old friend, it's like an old friend that you grew up with, and you're like brothers, and it's like, you haven't seen each other for 10 years, but when you see each other again, it's like just an old time, like you saw each other yesterday, and you're just joking and clowning and playing around like you did when you were kids, man. And it's just like, it's that feeling just to be back and just to be able watching those characters that you grew up with, that they grew up in front of you, you know what I mean? Like Arya, Sansa, all the Starks, Daenerys, everybody was there in the reunions today, you know what I mean? And like, it's just like I said, there's no words to describe, I want to describe it, and I'm going to do a video after every episode, not so much to review it per se, yeah, maybe just to tell you my feelings about, what happened, but it's just like more just to talk about like what the show means to me, because it's really one of those things, like, like when people ask me about like if you're on a desert island, what music would you want? I want that Bob Marley 4-disc box set, okay? Songs of Freedom. That's what I want on the island with me, you know what I mean? And I want the entire Game of Thrones episodes, the whole season, as a box set. If you put me on a desert island with the Bob Marley 4-disc Songs of Freedom box set, and you put me with the entire game, eight season of Game of Thrones, hey man, I'm good, right? I'm good, right? So, I'm so excited for this season. I'm so like, it's gonna be some heartache. It's gonna be tough. It's not gonna be easy. Just reading some of the interviews from some of the staff, the cast, about when they finished shooting, Emilia Clarke was like, she was walking around London just in a daze. It was like post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's what I'm anticipating this season, like some serious post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's the end of almost a decade of this Shakespearean epic. Lord of the Rings meets The Sopranos, meets The Goodfellas, meets The Godfather, meets Apocalypse Now. You name all the great movies that you're just sitting down and you're just like, and they stay with you. You know, they stay with you. It's like a good book, like 100 Years of Solitude. You know, you think about it all the time. It's constantly in your head. It becomes part of you, your philosophy. You know, it's like even now, of course, we're always quoting. You know, the Game of Thrones is everywhere with the quotes, and winter's here and winter's coming, and you know nothing, Jon Snow, and all that. It's just filled this world with so much. You know, we talk about like where we are in the world, where things are just tearing us apart. You know, politics, religion, all of this bullshit in this world that's been present since the beginning of the time, that's just ripping us apart because we're animals. You know, and we fucking hate each other and we're destroying the planet. But Game of Thrones is something that we've built as a civilization. It is the apex of cinema and television, right? It is the cutting edge of where we should be in that genre, that art form. And above all else, it's something that brings us together. You could meet people from Japan and from England and from all over the world, from Africa, from Asia, from India. And you may know nothing about each other or each other's culture, where you come from. You may not even know how to speak the same language. But the love and the passion, I shouldn't even say love, it's a passion and obsession. With Game of Thrones, it's transcendent, it's universal, and it's gonna last forever. When the show is gone, the final episode is aired in this season, and we're sitting there in tears, and we're shaking, and we're, you know, some of us in the corner of the shower with some cold water running over us, and we're just no. When we're in that type of physical and emotional trauma, you know, there's few things, if any, that has ever touched us. So this is a revolution of thought, of cinema, of art, of television, of everything that has come together to culminate in this one thing. You know what I mean? And you know, like, I am so excited for the season. I'm so sad and depressed that it's gonna end, and I'm gonna probably go through some serious turmoil with what's gonna happen in the season. It's like a chapter in your life is over. It's 10 years since 2010, man. It's like, you know, you talk about it like it's a family. You know, you talk about the Starks and the Lannisters and the, you know, Daenerys. She's the only Targaryen, of course, Jon. But like, you fall in love with these characters like they're your brothers and sisters, you know, and your friends and your enemies. You know, like Cersei and Ramsay and Joffrey and it's like, these people are your best friends and your worst enemies. And you know, I want to thank HBO. I want to thank the showrunners. I want to thank George R.R. Martin. I want to thank the actors. I want to thank the writers. I want to just thank everybody that had everything to do with this show, for making a fucking perfect show. Like, it's a perfect. It's like the pyramids, man. It's, you know, it's the seventh wonder of the world. It's like this will go down in history forever, and it'll stand as a monument to human achievement. And to the fans like me, man, all I can say is, you know, good luck. Winter's here. We gotta hold the door. All right? So, Guerilla Mike, man, I'm out. See you next week. Game of Thrones, baby. It's back.